Hello and welcome to another episode of the Divorce TV show live stream, finding out all about the best ways to divorce. And I'm going to talk today to what I call the right kind of lawyer. So my guest today is based in California, and Diana Romanov is an attorney and she deals with family law, and we're going to find out about how she encourages better ways to divorce. Welcome, Diana.
Hello. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us here. So, well, let's get straight to actually. Well, first of all, I wanted to say you have written a book, haven't you? Was that fairly recent? When did that come out?
Yes, it came out about a year ago. This is the book,
Yeah.
Divorce Like a Boss.
And what does that mean, divorce like a boss? Where did you get the title from?
The title came as an idea from my husband. First, I wanted to call it Divorce Guidance, and he said it's going to be boring.
I can't
It's not
disagree.
catchy enough. And Divorce Like a Boss means take charge of your life. Don't let someone else lead your divorce, because in California, like for example, in compared to Germany, um, when someone files for divorce, the petitioner, who is the initiator of the divorce, has to arrange the service to the other side. If someone wants something, spousal support, child support, they have to file a motion to get it. In some countries like Germany, the court does the service. So some I found in California, you gotta be in the driver's seat in order to get a successful divorce.
And is that literally just for the administrative side? Just even if you want to do it peacefully, you've really got to know what you're doing.
Exactly. So this book I created based on many consultations. And I noticed that a lot of people ask very similar questions. How do I dress to court? How much does divorce cost? How long does divorce take? Why do I need a psychologist or therapist? Why do I need an accountant for my divorce? Why do I need a mediator? And so I started my YouTube channel and created a lot of videos. And then I thought, some people are readers, not reading, not watching YouTube. So why don't I create a book with all the topics that repeat themselves? And so sometimes when a client calls me and says, "Hey, what do I address to court?" I'm like, "Okay, just just you got the book," because I give the book as part of my marketing to initial clients when they hire me. And I say, "Please read the book chapter about how to dress or how to assemble your team." So that way, when they wake up in the morning at 3 a.m. worrying about things, they can find topics in this book. And I covered as many topics as I can based on all questions I had, so that it's explained in a plain language without this legalese. And I also have some homework in every chapter asking questions. Oh, you probably don't see it here, but
So fully very informative. You mentioned court. So in the UK, one of the key messages that I'm still getting across to people, because a lot of people don't realise, is that you don't have to physically go to court to get divorced and to deal with the finances. In fact, if you end up in court over the finances, then something's gone horribly wrong, and so much of it is avoidable. But that's quite still a message that a lot of people haven't quite become clear on. In California, I remember talking to a mediator a few years ago who said there is no reason why your couples cannot decide, or blended families can't decide, this is how we're going to split things, this is how it's going to work, and they don't have to go and battle it out in court. Is that your experience, and how does that work for you as an attorney, where most people would assume you'd want to go to court and fight it out? So, and I don't think that's quite true of you, is it?
correct. 90% of my cases end up without having to go to court. And I encourage a lot of people who are in disagreement about spousal support, division of assets, evaluation of the business. First, get ready as if we're going to court, meaning show all the finances from both sides. hire an expert to create an asset split and debt split report, business evaluation, long-term spousal support analysis, everything that will be covered if we were to go to court, and then schedule 1 day mediation with one mediator. We call it shuffle diplomacy, where we're in Zoom and the mediator is going from one Zoom to another Zoom room. And then by the end of the day, we reach an agreement. I usually prepare already an agreement as if we settle, positive reinforcement. And then I use that agreement as to sign at the end of the mediation. And highly, highly contentious cases, especially in COVID, when going to court was not an option, it changed the way people divorce. And cases went to mediation, specifically because the next court date would be in a year and a half because of the backlog.
And it's great because I mean, COVID obviously was horrific for many, but one of the good things was, I think, as you say, that people discovered they can do mediation online. And I know that as many mediators have continued to do that, and particularly when you're dealing with people where there's domestic abuse. Another message that I'm always keen for people to get out there is there's a belief that you don't, or you can't use mediation if there's domestic abuse. But as you say, with shuttle mediation, they don't even have to look at each other. As long as you're providing the right support for people, they're better off doing that than they are being in the same courtroom with someone who they've been in physical and psychological danger from. Do you find that that is something again in California that people are starting to realize that not to use a domestic and psychological abuse as a excuse to kind of get vengeance in the courts, but actually that they're much more protected if they use to get the right support around them and to use something like mediating with a specialist mediator using shuttle mediation.
The key word you said, specialist mediator. There are
Yeah.
so many mediators. I noticed one time I had this case where an attorney said, a client was an attorney, and he said, I will do mediation, but I'll pick a mediator and I'll do it. I'll ask you for advice when I need it. And so it lasted approximately 2 years in mediation, because they would go in, talk about things they want to settle, and then the mediator would say, well, talk to your attorney. And so eventually I told him, let's settle this in 1 day. And what I like about the specific type of mediation, when I know the case, I pick appropriate mediator,
Yeah.
and attorneys have to be present, because there is no more back and forth, speak
Yeah.
to your attorney and come back. It would be same day. And the mediator, while shuffling, he's going or she's going to another room, the other side has 2 hours to talk
Mm,
sometimes,
yeah.
because the mediator is working hard to convince the other side to see the light. And that's how things get settled, not when parties choose to go to a mediator who is not committed. And I don't know if it's about the mediator themselves. It's more about the process, picking the
Yeah, I
mediator,
think it
making
is.
sure the attorneys are there, making sure all financials are there, because sometimes parties pick a mediator but they haven't done anything, they haven't
Mm,
done the homework, they
yeah.
haven't produced
You are
disclosures.
so right, Dan, and this is my big bugbear. As I say to people, don't just waltz into mediation and think they're going to wave a magic wand. You need to go in with your finances to go, and you're there to cut a deal. So you need to do all of that homework first. Otherwise, what are you mediating? It doesn't. You're not going to get what you need out of it. So I think that's a great strategy, and that idea of going in and spending the day, you need these boundaries, because especially if you're divorcing someone who's a bit tricky, they can use the mediations just as another way to stall, and you're kind of taking that away, especially, and again, having someone who is able to deal with some quite difficult people, because I don't think all mediators have that experience, because originally the idea was that people are reasonable and they'll come to the table, and of course we know that that's not what happens in divorce. So I think there's become now more mediators internationally who have these wonderful skills of dealing with very, very difficult people, and you do need a kind of a support network around them. So those relationships that you have with those mediators must be really important.
Correct. I have my pool of mediators, and I know this mediator likes to do high complex financial cases, and that mediator is really good at cases. And so when I know the dynamic of the relationship between the clients, sometimes it's a female mediator or male. So I, depending on the soul of the case, I pick the right mediator.
And what led you to becoming a divorce attorney? And what was there anything that surprised you about the industry as you began to find your feet as a qualified attorney?
I did some soul searching when I passed the bar in California. I passed it first in Germany, then I moved to California, and I thought at first I would like to be an estate planning attorney because it's peaceful. You know, people are generous and they don't fight much when they draft testament. And then I realized that my experience as a divorced as child of parents who have divorced 5 times, I have been divorced myself. And I used an attorney who I really adore, how he handled my divorce. I decided that I could see how I can help people from perspective of being seeing the children.
Yeah.
Sorry, understanding when children are involved. I have a completely different approach versus when people are fighting about money or if there is a short-term marriage. And so I also realize when people are very upset and acting, we in family law we say we get the best people at the worst behavior, and in criminal the worst people at the best behavior. And I have compassion because I have to say I wasn't a nice client. I regretfully admit that it was so stressful that I could see how people would act a certain way. So I have that level of compassion and understanding when I deal with divorcing couples.
And are there any clients that you have ever had to either refuse to work with or say goodbye to? Obviously, don't name them.
Of course. Would be confidential violation. I would never do that. Yes, there was one case where a husband, he was beating up his wife, and she flew and ran, took the child, and arrived in California. And that's the place she wanted to live because that was her original home state. And so he called me up and he said, I need your help in getting her back, meaning her with the child, because he understood he would not be able to take care of the child 100% of the time. And so what happened, I I told him, she's not gonna, if she ran from abuse, she's not gonna come back to live in the same state with you. What I can help you with is arranging a schedule with the child while she's in California, but I'm not going to be the one helping you to get her with the child back. You know, filing motions to quash service, relocation, and all of that. I'm not going to do that. So it was very high conflict case that I refused to take because I didn't like the cause.
Yeah.
And
And
there were many more similar cases like that.
but and for people who are, I would encourage people at the early stages to be getting advice and information about divorce and not wait till everything's blown up, become a mess, because there's so many issues they can avoid if they kind of do a bit of homework first. So if you were talking to someone at these early stages, which may be that they haven't told the other person yet, but they know that the marriage is over, what would be kind of key advice that you would give them?
First, be a detective. Get all financial information now because it's going to be so much more expensive to send out subpoenas. gather all the documents. You're in the home, you have all the banking statements in cabinets, and I'm not asking to go and hack the computer, but at least get all the information you have available to you, including your own bank accounts when you can. That's number one. For parents who are living in the same home, in fact, I ask not to move out, because once one parent moves out and the other parent stays with the children, then the status quo uh, will be harder to change, especially if it lasts for 6 months or a year. If a parent hasn't seen the children for often and only weekends, and now asking for 50-50 while it has 1 year passed, that's difficult. Assemble your team. I feel divorce is very, very toxic. Could be, not always. Find your therapist, because sometimes it's going to be rocky. Find a good accountant, and I have also my pool of accountant. Interview accountants, therapists. Get your team together, because that's going to be the small village to get divorce done in a most peaceful way.
I think that you mentioned therapists, that in California that's seen as a much more natural thing. I think for the English who are getting divorced, it's certainly heading more that way. But it's not always the first person people think of when they're getting divorced. It's not, certainly I'm often encouraging people to get some form of help, because they're not thinking straight, and it's a very hard process to go through if you're emotionally traumatized. So what do you think the benefits are? Not just therapists, but coaches, people who help clients really focus on what they want to do going forwards. What are the benefits that you find by building those people into the team?
To have a soundboard. I know attorney is one person, and I tend to think that on the back of my card I have therapist as a description, but it's more expensive to speak to an attorney who is not qualified to be a therapist. And a lot of the times people confuse that. So I suggest different specialists for different needs. If a client needs to vent about how narcissistic their spouse is, I'm not the right person to do that. And it will help them to focus our work together on what actually I personally can help to accomplish. So, and it also helps people to think more clearly if they have an accountant who does the accounting. And I tend to tell people, clients, what you procrastinate, delegate. I use it in my own life. So if I don't want to do something, I delegate that. Some clients who are accountants tend to believe that they can do their own accounting. No, they can't. In in, in 13 years, I haven't seen a single client who has done asset split the way that needs to be done. So accountants who focus on accounting that specifically designed for them to know the law, reimbursement law, post separation accounting, marital standard of living analysis, clients wouldn't know. So finding the right specialist in order to accomplish the very specific goal. And therapist will help to keep the emotions intact. The lawyer will make sure that all deadlines are met, and orders or mediation or whatever results we agree. And usually what we do in the initial consultation, we discuss everything we need to accomplish step by step. And I write a to-do list and deadlines. And then each of us does what we have on our to-do list. So that way we keep this process going. Otherwise, divorce itself can be procrastinated.
Yeah, definitely. And last but not least, I wanted to ask you that if you could wave a magic wand, or maybe it's something you're already dealing with, what would you change about the family laws, the divorce laws, and the way divorce is done in certainly in California and possibly beyond?
Well, it's already partially there. Not in all counties have a mandatory mediation process. Some counties have that where it's too short, not enough stuff. I think 99% of cases can be resolved in mediation. When people sit down and realize, well, actually, the issue I have is not about plus minus $20,000. It's about the insult I felt when you said X. And when they realize that it's not worth hundreds of thousands of dollars to fight one issue, and they can it just becomes more clear in mediation what it's truly about, what is underneath of all this. um, and I when clients come to my office, I ask them, what is really going on? Because sometimes when one person was unfaithful, they tend to overcompensate, and then they tend to regret it a year later. So once we get the emotional piece cleared up, things can get moving pretty fast and effectively. So
And
that's what I would change mediation as a mandatory procedure.
so that happens in every state, every county, and every state throughout America. I think that's a very good vision to hold. And just for clarity, as a because I think so, again, sometimes people think of mediation sort of either or using lawyers, but actually you obviously work in a very collaborative way, which I think is extremely healthy. What would you say to people who are using the mediation? What are you what role are you playing in that whilst the mediator is helping them come to agreement? Because I know it's quite a lot, but I think it's good to explain it to people.
When I'm in my room with a client while the mediator is in the other room, I explain, number one, what the law is more in depth, what we would get if we were to go to court, how much we would spend if we were to go to court, depending on the issue. Of course, custody is a different issue, but I I get I get to hear the client clear the air sometimes when when they know I'm in this room for 3 hours with them. Then first they talk about their life, and they feel much better explaining why and how things fell apart or whatever the issue is. And then they feel more comfortable thinking more clearly why they would like to settle on this particular issue. And usually in issues like spousal support, division of assets, the fight is not worth the money spent. And there is also opportunity cost. When a trial lasts for a year, the higher earner is not able to work as much, and emotionally it's very draining. So that's another lost opportunity cost that they have to consider.
Yeah, that's a great way, and I think that's one of um, that's something I would love to see more clarified more in the UK as well. Is that have people realizing that if when you work with a lawyer, the lawyer who's going to sit there and go, you're better off sorting it out here, rather than, oh, we'll go to court, we can probably do better, when actually, of course, most of the time that's not going to be the case if you've gone in with really good financials and you're doing it properly from the start. So my final question now is, what can you give an example of a case that you thought, oh, this one's going to be really hard, that was really challenging, but that somehow it managed to stay out of the courts, and what you think it was that allowed that to happen?
Whew, I had a couple cases like that. One case was in COVID, and it was a long-term marriage over 20 years, and she almost killed him. She was running with a knife, and she wanted more than half of everything. And then COVID hit. So trials were not possible. And this couple had real estate in in different centers that had to shut down, commercial buildings. So when we went to mediation, it was it, this case could have gone really, really bad, really fast, but because of the preparation and setup that I was describing before, getting the right accountant, calculating the numbers, having full disclosures, having the right mediator. At that time, we were sitting in physical room and then Zoom room, so that case settled. Another case I was attorney number 3, and the client who called me, it was 5 or 8 years of divorce already. So at that point, he already paid more than half of the length of the marriage in support, a lot of money, and he didn't have an accountant. He could not, no lawyer could have convinced him to hire an accountant, and it was a multi-million-dollar case. So I put a condition. I said, and I have to say that client had lots of emotional roller coasters to overcome. Condition: if we work together, we get to have an accountant and particular mediator. So that was helpful.
Yeah, setting the boundary, and I think it gives people confidence when you're not just there to be instructed and do whatever they want. It's like, now this is what you need to do. It gives people confidence. They know they're being given solid advice. That's Thank you so much, Diana, for taking us through a little bit
Yes,
of
thanks.
Californian divorce, and in
Thanks for
such a
having me.
positive way. And it's so good to hear positive stories. And I'm glad to hear that mediation is really growing there. And I can hold your vision as well of, wouldn't it be great if everyone was at least forced, not forced to mediate, but forced to have that experience, because I think too many people reject it without really even knowing what it is, and that's a great shame. So thank you so much, and I
Thanks for
will
having me.
see you online, and look forward to you adding your links and information about your book onto the post that I'll be sharing with you soon.
Thank you for having me. Have a good day.